Hello, and welcome to the most recent compilation 3-hour episode. I'm glad you're here. One reminder as we get settled in together here. Let's talk about ads. For my YouTube friends, I've got an ad break after story number 1, story number 2, and then story number 3. And that's it after that. And for my podcast friends, all 3 of those ad breaks happen pretty close to the 10-minute mark. I try to get those out of the way as soon as the platform will let me. And speaking of interruption-free, if you're listening on Spotify, you can subscribe to the podcast. That gets you a couple of things. I usually upload all of my episodes about a day early. You get early access before everybody else does. But maybe more importantly for some is that there are no ads ever on these subscriber-only episodes. I made that $1 per month. It's the least expensive option that Spotify would let me do. I hope you think about it. Okay, let's get to what we came here for and talk about some weird, unexplainable glitches in the Matrix. Alright, so check this out. Should I be worried about the Vardoger effect? Yesterday afternoon, my husband was out visiting a sick friend, and I was home alone with our dog and cats. I was in the kitchen when I heard my husband's car pull into the garage. Now, he drives a Corvette, and if you know Corvettes, you know how loud and distinct those engines are. There is no mistaking it. The sound filled the garage exactly the way it does every time he comes home. The dog, who had been lying right in front of the door that leads to the garage, heard it too. She immediately got up and stared at the door, waiting, just like she always does when she hears him arrive. But he never came in. I thought to myself, that's a little strange. He's not the type to just sit in the car for long, especially after pulling into the garage. But I got distracted with something else, and for a few minutes, I forgot about it. And then it hit me, he still hadn't come inside. So I walked over, I opened the door to the garage, and it was empty. His car wasn't there. Only silence. I figured, okay, maybe he pulled in and then quickly left again for some reason. Maybe he forgot something and ran back out. That would have been weird, but not impossible. Still, something about it didn't sit right with me. The sound of the engine had been too clear, too unmistakable, and the dog heard it too. She doesn't react like that to just any car. She knows the sound of his car. And that's when the thought crossed my mind. Was this one of those Vardoger experiences? You know, the phenomenon where people hear or see signs of someone arriving before they actually do, or even when they don't. It's kind of like deja vu, but in reverse. I brushed it off at first. No way, I thought. It couldn't have been that. It was so real. I heard the car. I felt the vibrations coming through the floor, and the dog clearly did too. Just to be sure, I texted my husband and I asked, "Hey, did you come home and then leave again really quick?" And he texted back saying, "No, I'm still at my friend's house." What the hell? There's absolutely no way that it was someone else's car. The garage door from the outside was closed. No one else could have pulled in, not even by mistake. And again, the sound was exactly his car. Not similar, or kind of sort of the same. I'm talking exact. I tried to explain it to him later, but he doesn't believe me. He just shrugged it off like I imagined it, but I didn't. I know what I heard, and the dog knew it too. Something happened, and I just can't explain it. Reappearing objects. I'm honestly aghast right now, still trying to wrap my head around what just happened. So, my boyfriend and I were cooking together in his late mother's kitchen, something that we do often. It's a comforting routine, cooking in that space. We were preparing dinner and needed breadcrumbs, which we always have a surplus of. I told him they're in the rotating cabinet. That's where they always are. He opened the cabinet and said, "I don't see them." I figured maybe he just wasn't looking hard enough. Classic case of fridge blindness, right? So I went over to check for myself. I opened that rotating cabinet and started searching. I turned the turntable around and around multiple times, but nothing. No breadcrumbs. I even went so far as to reach way back behind the turntable section just in case the can had fallen off the carousel and gotten lodged behind it. Instead of breadcrumbs, I retrieved several dusty old items, probably expired pantry goods from over 7 years ago, back when his mom was still with us. Things like old cans of cream of mushroom soup and baking powder that had long since lost its leavening powder. Still, no breadcrumbs. He checked again after me. He spun that cabinet so many times, it might have gotten dizzy if it were alive. We both agreed we had no breadcrumbs. So, we improvised. We pulled out some croutons and whizzed them in the blender to make our own. Not ideal, but hey, it worked. We finished that part of the meal and moved on. Not 10 minutes later, we went back into the exact same rotating cabinet to grab something else, and then I hear him call out from the kitchen. "You're not gonna believe this. Maybe Mom is playing tricks on us." I walked over, and there they were. 2 cans of breadcrumbs sitting right there, prominently placed on the shelf, front and center. Not like tucked behind anything, not obscured in any way. I mean, you could have spotted them from the next room. They were in the exact spot where I always put them. We both stood there in disbelief. This isn't the kind of thing you just miss. Not twice. Not after digging around and checking behind the turntable. And certainly not after we both took multiple passes, one right after the other. It makes no sense. And for what it's worth, my boyfriend is not a practical joker. That's just not his personality. And even if he were trying to pull a fast one, he would have cracked a smile by now. He's just not that good at keeping a poker face. There's no one else in the house. No one could have snuck in and placed them there. And I know what I saw, or I guess rather, what I didn't see. There's absolutely no way that we could have missed them. They're practically glowing on the shelf now. I can't accept the idea that we just happened to overlook them during a dozen different passes. I think something strange happened. I don't know how, and I can't explain it, but it wasn't just a missed can of breadcrumbs. It felt like a glitch in reality. I saw 2 children disappear into thin air. I've been wanting to share this experience for a while, but every time I've held back, thinking that maybe it was just a moment of madness. It happened about 1.5 years ago while I was driving to work. I had just turned right into the yard of my workplace when I saw 2 kids walking down the alley in front of me, maybe 50 meters or 160 feet just ahead. I slowed down just to be cautious because kids have a tendency to run all over the place. It was 7:45 in the morning, and the children looked to be between 3 and 5 years old. They were holding hands. One was wearing a blue coat and the other a yellow one. Both had their hats pulled over their heads, and I remember the moment clearly, how I wondered what those children were doing alone in the yard without any parents around. Actually, there really wasn't anyone in the yard besides the two of them. I watched them for about 5 seconds, trying to figure out what was going on, until they turned left, passing a parked car in front of the building where I work. I followed the same path almost immediately, since the parking lot is in the same direction. But when I turned left, the children were gone, and there was nowhere for them to go either. I started to panic a bit. It felt strange because between the moment they turned left and the moment that I did, they didn't even have enough time to open the door to the building. Obviously, I expected that when I turned left, I'd see them, at most, in front of the door. But no. It felt like the moment they turned left after the car, they just disappeared into thin air. I got out of my car and went into the reception area, still expecting to find the children there with their parents. But the reception area was empty, as expected, considering the workday hadn't even started yet. I kept replaying it in my head, trying to find a logical explanation, wondering if maybe my mind had only imagined seeing those kids. But the image of them was so clear. They were walking in front of my car. I remember their yellow and their blue jackets. I remember scanning the area for their parents. And I remember the exact thoughts going through my head. It was all real. I've had some paranormal experiences before, but I've never categorized this one as supernatural. It didn't quite feel that way. Everything was too real. The image of the kids was sharp and vivid. I wasn't afraid. And it was as if, for a moment, one reality crossed paths with mine, and just as suddenly pulled away. I've never had an experience like this before or since, which is why it still sticks in my mind. I put my socks on in the dark, and then things got weird. I did my laundry, like usual, and while I was folding clothes, I noticed one sock was missing. I figured, no big deal, it'll turn up eventually. So I laid it on a shelf in my room, and I didn't think too much of it. A couple of days go by, and then, one morning, my alarm goes off. I'm still half asleep, and like I always do, I reach into my sock drawer. It's in my nightstand, right next to my bed. First thing every morning, especially because I sleep in a cold room, and I'm talking no heat, and the windows cracked open. The first thing I do is grab a pair of socks and put them on while still lying under the covers. So I do exactly that. Still in bed, still in the dark, I pull on the socks I grabbed and I get up to start my day. I head into the kitchen and pour myself a cup of coffee. I then glance down at my feet, and I stop. They're the Oscar socks, the ones that I only had one of, the pair that I couldn't complete just a few days ago. At first, I thought, okay, someone must have found the missing one and paired it up for me. Maybe a family member that I live with or one of our roommates just saw it and tossed it in the drawer. Made sense. So I walk back to my room, coffee in hand, just to double check. I look over at the nightstand, at the shelf where I originally left the single sock, and it's still there. The same sock, just sitting there. So now I'm wearing a complete pair, and there's this new third one there just sitting on my shelf. some of the stories that I present on this channel can get a little bit existential or intense from time to time, but this next one is a light-hearted, quick one. How did my underwear beat me upstairs? I don't know what the hell just happened, but I'm actually freaking out. After I finished my shower, I went downstairs to the laundry room to grab a fresh pair of socks and underwear. I set them down on the dryer for a second to fix my towel, because it was coming off, and when I looked back at the spot where I'd placed my underwear, they were gone. I figured, that's annoying, but no big deal. Maybe they just fell between the washer and the dryer or something. So I grabbed my socks and another pair of underwear and headed back upstairs to my room. But when I got up there, the underwear that I had just misplaced were literally lying on my floor. What in the actual kid-tested, mother-approved kicks is going on here? I just saw time go backwards or loop. I was folding my laundry while scrolling through Instagram. Sometimes, when I find a video that I want to watch later, but I'm not in the mood at the moment, I set an alarm with a link to the video so I can come back to it. So, I decided to start watching the video that I'd set an alarm for at 3 p.m. But it was about 5 minutes before 3 p.m. I opened Instagram and watched that video twice. It was 1 minute and 30 seconds long, so that's 3 minutes total. Then I watched the video right below it 2 times as well. That one was 3 minutes long, so watching it 2 times took another 6 minutes. While I was watching, my actual 3 p.m. alarm went off. I snoozed it and I kept watching the second video for the second time. When I was finally done, I looked at the time and it was 2:56 p.m. I know for sure that the 3 p.m. alarm went off because I had to click out of Instagram for a second to get the video sound to come back. I hope that explanation makes sense. But I'm wondering if anyone else has ever experienced anything like this. For as long as I can remember, I've been slipping through the cracks of reality. I know I'm going to sound crazy, and honestly, I have only fractured memories of what happens, but this has been occurring randomly throughout my life. I've never been able to fully explain it, and now I'm reaching out to see if anyone out there has experienced something even remotely similar. Please understand, what I'm describing won't make perfect sense, because the moment these episodes end, the details begin to fade, like waking up from a dream. But I'm not dreaming. I'm fully alert, awake, and aware. And yet, when it happens, it's like reality is breaking. The most recent experience happened just last week. I was at the movie theater with some friends. Everything was normal. I walked up to a poster in the hallway before the film started, just to read the fine print at the bottom. As I got to the end of the text, I saw the period at the very bottom of the poster, and then it zoomed in. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like a video game camera being toggled, suddenly locking onto the smallest detail and pulling me in. My entire perspective shifted, and I felt like I was falling into that period, like it was a hole in space. Instantly, I lost all sense of my physical form. My body? Gone. Just like that. I tried to hold on to who I was, desperately repeating my own name in my mind, trying to remember me but it was like trying to cling to vapor. Everything around me melted into blackness. And then, memories started coming back. Not recent ones, old ones, ancient feeling ones, familiar but just out of reach. I remember a white room with soft blue lights. I remember machinery, the hum of it, and the coldness in the air. I remember voices, not like human voices exactly, but intelligent ones nonetheless. They were talking about me. At least, I think they were. They kept calling me it. I wasn't in a body anymore, just a floating consciousness, trapped in some kind of liminal space where time didn't exist. I felt like I was being observed, like I was the subject of an experiment or test I couldn't understand. And the weirdest part? I felt calm, like unnervingly calm. There was no fear, only a deep sense of knowing. Like somehow, I'd been here before. Like this was some checkpoint that I visited now and again. I don't really know how else to explain it. Flashes of my own life, snapshots from childhood to now, rushed through me like a slideshow on fast forward. Sometimes I felt present and aware, and other times it was like I was just watching. But as always, the moment I came back to reality, those details began to dissolve like the fog at sunrise. Suddenly, I was back in the theater, sitting in my seat, waiting for the movie to start. Everything looked normal. My friends didn't seem to notice anything. No strange behavior, no break in conversation. But I was soaked in sweat, completely drenched, as if I'd run a marathon in another dimension. I wish I could explain this better. I wish I could hang on to those memories long enough to write them all down, but they slip away every single time. This has been happening to me since I was a kid. Random intervals with no warning. I need to know. Has anyone else ever experienced something like this? I need to know I'm not alone. We witnessed a glitch in the forest. My boyfriend and I were in the mountains of Poland. To get up there, you take these beautiful, old-fashioned horse-drawn carriages. It's part of the charm. No cars, just carriages that wind through the forested paths. We had finished our hike and were waiting in the area where everyone gathers to be picked up for the ride back. There were quite a few people, so multiple carriages were needed. Most stood along the road, quietly chatting or taking in the scenery. I wandered off a bit, toward the edge of the woods, just looking around, mostly for bugs. I love spotting little creatures in the underbrush. That's when I noticed an older woman walk into the woods. It struck me as odd. No one else was venturing into the trees. Everyone was sticking close to the road or just standing at the edge. And this woman, she was going in alone. I remember her very clearly. Her haircut, the way she moved, her jacket. Nothing really unusual, but she stood out because she was the only one breaking away from the group and walking deeper into the trees. I was still near where she had entered the woods when my boyfriend, who was standing a bit farther back, suddenly turned and said, "Did you hear that?" I just heard a hissing sound from the woods. I laughed and said, "Maybe it was the lady who just walked in there." And right at that moment, that exact moment, someone came out of the woods. But it wasn't the woman. This was a man. However, he was wearing the exact same jacket. He had the same build, same walk, but now the hair was short and the face was unmistakably male. My boyfriend looked confused and said, "You mean the man?" I blinked and said, "Wait, no, I swear, that was a woman when they went in. Short, kind of grayish hair, but definitely styled like a woman's. I watched a lady walk into the woods." Then my boyfriend said, "Yeah, I saw a woman go in too. That's why I'm confused. He's wearing the same jacket as her." We both kept watching, thinking maybe we'd mixed something up. Maybe two people had gone in and we just didn't notice. But no. No one else came out of those woods. Eventually, one of the horse-drawn carriages arrived. The man got on by himself, and the carriage rolled off. We had to wait a little longer for the next one, and the entire time we watched the tree line, and still, no woman ever emerged. I might have chalked it up to just me being tired or misremembering, but my boyfriend saw her too. We both noticed her, and we both saw her go in, and we both saw a different person come out wearing the exact same jacket. To this day, we still talk about it sometimes, and we wonder, what happened in those woods? How do I remember something that didn't happen? I've got a weird one from this morning that I don't think anyone's going to believe. I got a grocery delivery and grabbed most of the bags, but I left a couple on the porch. I distinctly remember making that choice because the bags that I did grab were already too heavy. I figured I'd quickly unload those into the fridge and freezer because the two bags that I left out didn't have anything in them that needed to be cold, and then I'd come right back for those. I unloaded the bags, went back to the porch, and the others were gone. At first, I was kind of mad, thinking that someone had come and taken them, but I've got cameras, and they're obvious. So I finished putting things away, then I grabbed my phone to check what was missing. But nothing was missing. All of my groceries were already inside, including an extra pack of mini donuts that I got as a sweet little treat. Still, I know I left 2 bags outside, except now my memory is starting to change. Now I can see myself grabbing those bags as well, but I know I didn't. I acted like I didn't. I planned like I didn't, and it's freaking me out that my brain is giving me 2 different versions of what happened. I just really hope that if I did somehow switch timelines, this one's better than the one I left. This next story was sent in to DarekWeberSubmissions@gmail.com. If you have a unexplainable glitch in the Matrix story that you want me to read, send it there. Clay says, "Here in the United States, every January we receive tax forms from our employers so we can file our taxes. This year, 2025, I received a tax form from one of my part-time jobs. Once inside the house, I opened it and looked at the amount that I had earned in 2024. It was more than I expected, though I hadn't done any calculations, so I had no true number in mind. The 5-digit number had the first 3 digits as a repeating digit. Think $55,500 and something dollars, for example. It was not $55,000, quite a bit less, actually. But the thing is, I looked at it. Several weeks later, when I had received all of my forms, I sat down and started my taxes. When I got to that particular form, it was unopened. Now, for those not in the USA, most normal tax forms come sealed in such a way that you have to destroy part of the form to open it. This one is glued across the bottom and perforated along the 3 other sides. You cannot open it without tearing something, period. The form was in perfect condition, unopened, undamaged, untorn. It looked absolutely untouched. I asked my wife if she remembered me telling her the amount when I originally saw it, but she didn't remember the conversation, and I hadn't shown it to her either. I reminded her what the repeating number was, and then I opened the form, and I was right. It was exactly as I remembered, yet there's no way that I could have seen the information as the form wasn't opened yet. I'm not a math whiz. I hadn't bothered to calculate my wage and hours worked and such. I had no way to know this number without reading it on this form. No emails, no phone calls, nothing. So how did it happen? How did I look at it without opening it? Clay includes a Mandela effect as well, which is not something we do often on the channel, but I'm pleased when one comes by. Many years ago, like 2009, 2010, I was in the kitchen early one morning, preparing breakfast and lunch for me and my wife. We worked in the same office, and she was getting ready to leave for work. I had already done so and was getting food ready. On the TV was Matt Lauer on Good Morning America. He reported that a comedic actor had unspawned himself. I had never heard of the actor. Then Lauer went on to say which TV show the actor had been on, and it was one that I had never watched. Being unacquainted with the actor, I went on with my life. Now, imagine my surprise when that same actor was arrested for felony SA in the early 2020s. Until that moment, I have no recollection of ever hearing the man's name since the initial report on the TV. He apparently never harmed himself in that fashion, or at least not in this timeline. This is another email submission from Rugged Rick. It's called My Schoolie Named Itself. Hi Derek. When I was building my schoolie, which is a school bus converted into a motorhome, I decided to name it the HPA Castaway. HPA stands for His Pompous Ass, which is a jab at how England always arrogantly names their ships HMS for His Majesty's Ship or Her Majesty's Ship. I scrapped the metal walls inside the bus because they needed to be insulated. One of the panels had the vehicle's VIN, axle weights, and more on it, but it was a sticker and couldn't be saved. So I ordered a placard on Vistaprint with the same information and added my own details, including the name of the bus, HPA Castaway. I was very careful when entering the info to make sure it was all correct, including saying in my mind, His Pompous Ass, when I came to the abbreviation of HPA. They shipped it to me. It said HPA Castaway, and all the data was correct, so I installed the placard. Later in the build, after I finished painting the exterior with automotive paint, I wanted to put the name of the bus on the outside. Both sides were to have the name, so I found a company to print peel and stick lettering for the name, HPA Castaway, once again verifying that's the name of the bus by saying it in my head as to what it stands for. I placed the order and waited for it to ship. The day it came, I verified it to make sure that everything was there. However, this time, I unfolded them and both signs read HPS Castaway. Strange, I thought. I actually once thought about HPS being a good abbreviation, but that wasn't the one that I chose. And it was a while since I decided to go with HPA instead, as I couldn't think of an acronym for HPS. I figured that was an odd error that they made, but I contacted them about it. I let them know that I not only read it off very clearly in my head as to what it stands for to make sure that it matches, but I also had a placard made with the same name. And they mentioned to me that they don't change orders without being asked to do so, and that I could buy an A if I'd like. That pun is all Rick, by the way. I said that when I got to the shop where I was building the bus later in the day, that I'd take a picture of the placard and send it to them. That'll show them that the spelling didn't match, and I was being very careful to make sure that it matched and was correct. The next time I was at the bus, I went to take a picture of the placard, and lo, it now said HPS Castaway. I still, to this day, don't know how that happened, but I decided the bus just must want a quantum physics sounding name, so I spent hours coming up with some. Fun project, mind you, not being sarcastic at all. I eventually made it stand for Hyperplanetary Superpositioner. And this wasn't the only time that the bus had bent reality to its whim. There have been numerous objects disappearing only to reappear later in the same spot that I checked. Also, I once had my sunglasses go missing when I had them in my jacket pocket while outside of the Castaway, only to return the jacket to its hook inside the Castaway, and the glasses reappeared. Another time, we drove to Quartzsite, Arizona, through much dust and desert, and when the guy went to put the parking sticker on at the campground, he was shocked that the bus wasn't even dirty. And FYI, everything gets covered in dust here. And yes, my bus is always dusty inside. There's a thick layer of dust all over the dashboard from leaving the windows and door open for air. Months later, and there's only a very thin amount of dust on the outside. That shouldn't be possible under any normal circumstances. It doesn't rain much here either. I've always maintained that reality is very different in and around the Castaway. Rick goes on to say, "Okay, Derek, you can cue up your creepy sound effects now for the next story." Thanks, Rick. I think I will. I'm creating a new segment on this show called the No Way Files. It's a part of the show where I share incidents, larger incidents, that have some sort of news coverage, contain an inconceivable amount of coincidences, and sound absolutely like they should not be true, but they are, and they're verifiable. In this episode segment of the No Way Files is a story about a man who's been dubbed the Eternal Survivor. You've probably heard the expression, lightning never strikes the same place twice. But what if I told you that someone survived the unthinkable twice, not metaphorically, but literally? What if someone lived through the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and then, 3 days later, survived the bombing of Nagasaki too? It's not science fiction. That's the real story of Tsutomu Yamaguchi, a man who defied death not once, but twice in one of the most destructive events in human history. It was August 6th, 1945. World War II was still raging, and Japan, though on its heels, had not yet surrendered. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was a 29-year-old naval engineer working for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. He was in Hiroshima on business, helping finalize the blueprints for an oil tanker. His assignment was supposed to last 3 months. That morning, his final day in the city, he was preparing to leave. Then, at exactly 8:15, he looked up. There was a blinding white flash, a noise louder than anything he had ever heard, and then heat. Intense, unbearable heat. The United States had just dropped the first atomic bomb ever used in warfare. It was called the Little Boy. Yamaguchi was about 2 miles from ground zero when the bomb detonated. The explosion instantly killed tens of thousands. It flattened buildings and created a firestorm across the entire city. But somehow, he survived. Yamaguchi was thrown into a potato field. His eardrums were ruptured, he was blinded temporarily, his face and arms were burned so badly that his skin peeled off in sheets. Despite that, he crawled his way to what was left of the Mitsubishi office, found 2 of his colleagues, who also survived, and they spent the night in a bomb shelter. The next day, covered in bandages and barely able to walk, he made his way to the train station, and unbelievably, the trains were still running. Yamaguchi boarded a train and headed back to his hometown, Nagasaki. He arrived in Nagasaki on August 8th. His family was shocked to see him in such a condition, burned, deaf, shaken, and he explained to them what had happened in Hiroshima. He returned to work the very next day, on August 9th. Still wrapped in bandages, he reported to Mitsubishi's Nagasaki office. When he told his supervisor that Hiroshima had been destroyed by a single bomb, his boss looked at him and said, "Hey, you're an engineer. Use your head. No single bomb can do that." And that's when the second bomb fell. At 11:02 a.m., the second atomic bomb, named Fat Man, detonated over Nagasaki. Once again, Yamaguchi was about 2 miles from the blast. This time, the bomb's trajectory and the city's terrain created a slightly more contained explosion, but the destruction was still catastrophic. Windows shattered, buildings collapsed, and fires erupt instantly. Yamaguchi was thrown to the ground, but again, he survived. His already bandaged body suffered even more burns. Radiation sickness kicked in quickly, and he began vomiting. His hair began to fall out, and still, he lived. He wasn't the only double survivor, either. At least 165 people are believed to have experienced both bombings, but Tsutomu Yamaguchi is the only one that's officially recognized by the Japanese government as a survivor of both. His family, his wife and infant son, also survived the Nagasaki bombing. His wife had been out buying burn ointment for him when the second bomb hit. A wall shielded her from the worst of the blast, but radiation doesn't stop after the flash. Over the following weeks, Yamaguchi's wounds festered. His hair continued to fall out, and he drifted in and out of consciousness. At one point, he overheard a doctor tell his wife that he wasn't going to make it. Yamaguchi recovered, slowly, painfully, but completely. He went back to work. He raised his child, but he stayed quiet. Like many hibakusha, or atomic bomb survivors, he didn't speak much about what he'd seen. There was stigma attached to radiation exposure in post-war Japan. Survivors were often discriminated against in jobs, housing, and even marriage. For decades, he lived in silence. But in the early 2000s, Tsutomu Yamaguchi began to speak out. At the urging of his daughter, he began writing about his experience, and he became an anti-nuclear activist. He wrote a memoir, he gave interviews, he traveled, and in one appearance, he told the United Nations that, having experienced atomic bombings twice and survived, it is my destiny to talk about it. He lived long enough to see his story officially verified by the Japanese government in 2009. He was recognized as the only Niju Hibakusha, a double exposure survivor. He died the following year, in January of 2010, at the age of 93. How does a man survive 2 atomic bombings in 3 days? It can't be luck or fate. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's proof that the line between impossible and improbable is thinner than we think. Or maybe Tsutomu Yamaguchi was simply too stubborn to die. I mean, he had work the next day. Whatever the reason, his story isn't just one of survival. It's a testament to human resilience and a stark reminder of what we're capable of, both in destruction and in endurance. Some stories challenge what we think is possible. Tsutomu Yamaguchi's story doesn't just challenge that, though, it redefines the way we think about possible. He didn't have superpowers. He wasn't in a bunker the whole time. He wasn't lucky, right, in the traditional sense. He was a man who walked through fire twice and kept going. So the next time someone tells you lightning never strikes twice, tell them about Yamaguchi. This has been the No Way Files. And trust me, we're just getting started. I heard a dinner party that wasn't there. I was 10 years old, staying the night at my grandparents' house. It was late, and I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep. Everything was quiet, and everyone else in the house was already asleep. But then, I started hearing these strange sounds. The only way that I can describe them is that it sounded like a dinner party. A bunch of people talking all at once, mingled voices overlapping, along with the soft clattering of plates and silverware. It didn't sound distant, but it did sound muffled somehow, almost like it was being played from an old cassette tape. It had this vintage quality to it. And the weirder part, it was looping, the same set of sounds playing over and over again, like a broken record. I couldn't make out any specific words, just a swirl of voices blending together into a wall of sound. I got up and I started walking around the house, trying to figure out where it was coming from. My grandma had one of those tiny old-school TVs on her nightstand that she used to fall asleep with it on sometimes, so I figured maybe that was it. But when I checked, that TV wasn't on, and the room was silent. Everyone in the house was asleep. No TVs, no radios, no reason for this sound to be happening. But every time I got back into bed and I tried to relax, the dinner party sounds would start again, and each time they got louder and more intense right in my ears, like they were surrounding me. There was an old computer in the room too, one of those early 2000s desktops with the big bulky monitor. I wondered if maybe the sound was coming from that somehow, so I unplugged it, but the sounds kept going. I was freaked out, and I wasn't drifting off to sleep either. This wasn't like a dream or a sleep paralysis thing. I was wide awake. I was restless. I kept getting out of bed, walking around, trying to track the sound down, but I never found a source. The only explanation that I can come up with is that it might have been some kind of auditory hallucination. But even then, I've never experienced anything like that before or since. A glitch that saved our lives. This happened a long time ago. Joe and I were driving down a busy street late one night, headed to a restaurant, probably close to 1 a.m. We were approaching a four-way intersection where the traffic lights were flashing. We had a flashing yellow, and the cross street had flashing red. To our right, we could see another car coming, still a good block away. I looked at it, and I said to Joe, "I don't think that guy's gonna stop." Joe said, "Yeah, that guy's definitely not gonna stop." As we were having this conversation, I came to a complete stop at the intersection, and sure enough, the other car flew right through their red light without slowing down at all. We both said he didn't stop. And yeah, looking back, our conversation was kind of weird, almost like we were reciting lines or predicting the future in real time. But we just kind of brushed it off and kept going, heading toward the restaurant like planned. The next night, we were doing the exact same thing, driving the same route at around the same time, and all of a sudden, it hit me. I said to Joe, "We shouldn't have been able to see that car last night." Joe looked at me, confused, and I pointed out the obvious. All of these houses, they're in the way. You see, the street we were on runs through a mostly residential neighborhood, with fences, tall trees, and houses lined up with barely any space between them. There aren't any large gaps, and no open fields or empty lots. It's just house after house. There's no way that we should have been able to see a car coming from the cross street, especially not from a block away. You can't see the headlights until they're basically in the intersection. For years after that, every time I drove through that intersection, I would look around and try to figure out how in the world we both saw that other car. But it never makes sense. It's really impossible. I do believe that someone, or something, was watching over us that night. I left this item in one town, and it found me in another. This happened around 2018 or 2019. For some context, I've always been into anything paranormal, conspiracies, aliens, all of it. But around 2017, I got really into it. I started spending all of my time researching every topic that I could, and a lot of synchronicities started happening to me. Now, on to the day that this happened. I had this beanie. It was a koala beanie with little ears on top that a friend had given me. My live-in boyfriend at the time loved that hat. He'd always ask for me to wear it and would go on about how cute I looked in it. That day, I was meeting up with an old friend that I hadn't seen in a couple of years. She was picking me up. We live in a small town, but she lived about 25 minutes away, kind of in the middle of nowhere. She picks me up, and I'm wearing the hat, and we get to her place. We're hanging out. Her husband is there, tattooing some of his friends, and one of them says he likes my beanie. I say thanks and take it off, along with my jacket, because it's hot in that house. I set both of them down on a stool. Later, my friend and I go outside to smoke. It's coldish, so I grab my jacket, but I leave the beanie on the stool. We finish up in her truck, and I ask her to drop me off. We're now about 10 minutes from my house when I realize I forgot my beanie. I immediately get sad, and I start telling her how much my boyfriend loves that thing. He's going to be so bummed. I ask if I can grab it tomorrow, and she says, yeah, sure. She drops me off, and I walk into my house. After you enter my front door, just to the left is a small hallway that leads to my room. I walk in, and the first thing that I say is, I forgot my beanie. And he goes, oh, love, that sucks. But hey, we'll get it tomorrow. In the meantime, I've rolled a blunt and was waiting for you to get here. We start heading to the backyard. We go through the living room, then into the small hallway that leads to the back door. And right there, on the floor of the hallway, is my little koala beanie with the ears on top. How did that thing travel from my friend's house that lives almost 30 minutes away to my hallway? Somebody in the comments asks, "Okay, that's crazy. But what about your friend? Did she find your beanie at her house too? And now there are two?" OP responds with, "She looked, but she could never find it." I heard their conversation from 45 miles away. I've had a lot of weird things happen in my life, but this is the only time that this particular thing has ever happened, and I still don't understand it. My ex and I were kind of casual friends with this other couple who lived a town over. Not super close, but we'd visit them now and then, just friendly. One day, I was passing through their town on my way home. My husband asked me to stop by the guy's workplace and pick something up from him. I did. It was a quick stop, and since I was already in the area, I figured I'd swing by and visit the girl too, so I did. I didn't even think to mention to her that I'd just seen her boyfriend. It never crossed my mind. The visit was chill, then I left. Nothing unusual. Fast forward 3 weeks. I'm in my bathroom brushing my teeth when I suddenly hear her voice. Like, very clearly. But not with my ears. It's in my head. But I know that it wasn't a thought either. I don't know how else to explain it. It wasn't my inner voice or monologue or imagination. It was her voice, and she was mad. Big mad. She was yelling at her boyfriend. She said, "You think I'm stupid, huh? Y'all MFers think I'm dumb AF." And there was more. But it started getting fainter, and I could hear his voice too. It sounded like he was trying to walk away. He said, "Nobody thinks you're stupid, but you are effing crazy." Then she yelled, "Why didn't she tell me she stopped by your work? You slipped up and told on yourself now." More ranting followed, and that's when it hit me. Oh, this is about me. I stood there, frozen, toothbrush in hand, head tilted like I was trying to figure out if I was hallucinating. Was I making this up? But deep down, I knew that I wasn't. I knew it was real, and it was happening somewhere. He said something like, "I don't know, probably because there was nothing to tell. Now please shut up about it." The last thing I heard her shout was, "I'm gonna get to the bottom of this one way or another." And him replying, "Leave that girl alone before you embarrass yourself." Afterward, I tried to gaslight myself into thinking that it was just a weird, random, intrusive thought. Like some imaginary movie scene playing out in my head, except it was only audio, and it involved people I actually know. I moved on, or I tried to. That night, I'm laying in bed, doom scrolling, when I get a messenger notification. It's her. She's furious. She starts asking me the exact same questions that I'd heard her shout earlier, some of it word for word. I was, honestly, completely shook. I explained that my husband had asked me to pick up a tool that he'd loaned her boyfriend. I told her I wasn't trying to hide anything, and I apologized if it felt that way. I also don't know if her boyfriend explained that to her. I didn't hear anything about that in the telepathic episode. But more importantly, how in the heck did I hear their argument almost an hour away in my head? I'm still shook by it, trying to make sense of it. Does anyone have any comments or questions or theories? I'd love to hear. Some of my favorite glitch stories are driving stories, and this person wants to remain anonymous, so I'm calling this story 3 Encounters, 1 Van, 0 Logic. A few months ago, I was driving home from a work trip in New York. It was 2 a.m., and I'd been on icy roads for about 10 hours, so I was exhausted. Still, I know what I saw, and I saw it multiple times. In the middle of absolute nowhere in Ohio, I caught up to a van driving along a semi. It was a 2-lane highway, and the van wouldn't let me pass for a long time. It just matched the semi's pace, even though both were going well below the speed limit. The van was also swerving a lot, and I was eager to get away from that. When it finally pulled ahead of the semi, I started passing it on the right. I kept my eye on the van's headlights in my left mirror as I went by. And like I said, they had been driving erratically, and I didn't want it hitting me. Once I was safely ahead, I glanced at the road in front of me, and then I checked my left mirror again. But the van was gone. I didn't see any headlights or anything. Just empty road, and then the semi about a half a mile behind. Completely confused, I looked forward, and there it was. That same van was now about 100 feet ahead of me, still in the left lane. At this point, I was seriously disoriented and questioning everything. I told myself it was 2 a.m. and I was sleep deprived. Maybe I just imagined it. But the thing is, I watched the van in my mirror as it dropped behind me. There's no way it could have gotten 100 feet ahead in less than a second, and there were no other vehicles ahead of me when I first passed it. Still uneasy, I passed the van again, and this time, it stayed behind me. I sped up and I got the heck out of there. About 10 minutes later, I caught up to a familiar-looking vehicle. Same van, same company logo and slogan on the side too. I recognized it instantly. Still crawling in the left lane, still driving like a drunk. Heart sinking, I passed it on the right again, watching its headlights as I did. And again, when I looked away and looked back, nothing. No headlights, no van. And this time, it wasn't ahead of me either. Now, I was truly creeped out. After a very tense 10 minutes of driving, guess who shows up again? Yeah, that same van. Thankfully, that third time, it behaved like a normal vehicle when I passed it, which was lucky because I was close to having a full-blown breakdown by then. I got home about an hour later, totally disturbed, and got some much-needed rest. The only logical explanation that I can come up with is that there were somehow 3 identical vans with the same logo messing with me by turning their headlights on and off. But when I think back, I also saw streetlights, and I still would have seen them. Plus, they'd have to time their lights perfectly to my mirror checks, which just seems ridiculous. To this day, the whole thing still gives me the creeps. I need someone to explain this to me. When I was 7, my parents and younger sister and I went on a road trip to West Virginia. At some point, my dad took a wrong turn, and suddenly, all of the electronics stopped working. And when I say all of them, I mean everything. The radio, my phone stopped playing music, my dad's phone with the GPS, it was completely dead too. And it didn't help that we were lost. We're from another state near New England, and none of us had any idea where we were. My dad kept driving, taking random turns, trying to figure it out. And that's when we found this ghost town. One minute, we were surrounded by roads lined with trees, and the next, we were in this dusty, abandoned town. And the creepy part? It looked like everyone had just vanished. Like the rapture had happened and taken every single person away. The doors to the houses were open, toys were scattered on the ground, and there wasn't a single person in sight. I have no idea how long we were there, and my whole family remembers it exactly the way I do, the way I'm telling you now. After what probably felt like 10 minutes, my dad took another turn, and suddenly, we were back on a main road, and everything started working again. If anyone has had this happen to them before, or if you have some sort of explanation for what we saw, I'd love to hear it. I had myself a Twilight Zone moment. This happened the other day, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I go to physical therapy once a week, and the guy that I see has his office in a 5-story building. There's an elevator, and his office is on the 4th floor. So I finish my appointment up there, and I head back to the elevator to go back down to the 1st floor, the lobby. When the doors open, there's a woman already inside. I ask her, "Are you going down too?" And she says, "Oh, no, sorry, I'm going up to the 5th floor." I say, "No problem, I'll ride up 1 floor with you, and then I'll head down." She gets off on the 5th floor, and I press the button for the lobby. I watch the screen on the elevator as it counts down. 5, 4, 3, 2, and then I finally see L for lobby. I get out and decide to use the bathroom before leaving. Now, I think this is important to note. There is a bathroom right in front of the elevator on every floor, but the lobby is the only floor with tile flooring. All of the other floors have blue carpet. As I walk to the bathroom, I specifically notice the tile floor, and I think to myself, yep, lobby confirmed. I use the bathroom, I come out, and without really realizing, I start walking towards the exit. And that's when I notice the blue carpet under my feet, and I realize that I just passed my physical therapist's office on the 4th floor. There is no exit door. It's just a wall at the end of the hallway. At that point, I'm totally disoriented. I walk back to the elevator, and the number on the wall says 4. I'm on the 4th floor. I quickly take the elevator back down to the actual lobby, and I get out of there. I kept thinking maybe the elevator glitched and dropped me off on the 4th floor by mistake, but that wouldn't explain how I clearly saw the tile and recognized the lobby before going into the bathroom. I've dealt with paranormal stuff my whole life. I grew up in a house with lots of activity, but I've never experienced anything like this. It's like the bathroom teleported me back up to the 4th floor or something. Or maybe I just hallucinated the whole thing. I honestly don't even know anymore. The night we saw something that shouldn't exist. My father and I were driving through regional Victoria, Australia at around 3 or 4 in the morning. It was still well before sunrise, so it was completely dark outside. The roads were quiet, and the only light came from our headlights cutting through the darkness. We'd taken this route dozens, or maybe even hundreds of times before. Same stretch of road, same early hour, Nothing had ever felt unusual or off about it. But this time was different. As we continued driving, something suddenly appeared in our headlights. A massive figure loomed just ahead, standing in the middle of the road. It only lasted for a few seconds, but my father and I both saw it, clear as day. The shape was huge, roughly the size of a large horse, but the appearance was more like a skeleton of a sheep. It didn't move very much, but it looked like it lifted its head slightly towards us as we passed, and its presence just felt wrong, unnatural. It was on the opposite side of the road, so we didn't make eye contact. We just drove past it, and within seconds, a large truck came from the opposite direction, speeding down the very lane where that figure had just been standing. The truck didn't slow down. It didn't even tap the brakes. And there's no way that it could have hit something that size and just kept going like nothing happened. And yet, nothing was there. I was still watching through the back window, expecting to see it scramble away or get hit, but it had simply vanished. My father and I didn't speak for at least 15 minutes after that. The air in the car felt heavy, like we'd both witnessed something that we didn't understand. When we finally did talk, it was clear. We had seen the exact same thing. We both felt real fear, visceral fear. We've driven down that same road at the same time many times before and since, and we've never seen anything like that again. To this day, I have no idea what we saw. After doing some research, there's no known local folklore or mythology that describes anything remotely similar to what we saw. And my dad, he's a farm guy, born and raised in that area. If it had been a horse or a sheep or any ordinary animal, he would have recognized it in a heartbeat. But he didn't, and neither did I. This timeline doesn't add up. This happened in 2023. I was hanging out with my friend at the time. It was 2 a.m., and we were planning on staying up all night playing games. I went downstairs to get water. We live in a desert area, so things get pretty hot in my room. When I came upstairs, I nearly tripped over his controller cord. I caught myself, but in the process, I yanked it hard. The USB cable snapped completely, and the force nearly pulled his Xbox off of the dresser. The tension on the cord must have put a lot of strain on the AC cable too, because it ended up breaking the port entirely. I felt awful, like the kind of guilt that sits in your chest and just makes you question yourself. That deep, self-degrading kind of guilt. He didn't yell or get upset, but we decided to call it a night after that. The mood had just dropped. We both went to bed. The next morning, sometime around 8 or 9, I got up and I noticed something strange. His Xbox was working again. At first, I figured maybe he fixed it while I was asleep, but when I asked him about it, he looked genuinely confused. He told me that we both went to bed at the same time and stayed asleep the entire night. But that's not adding up. I know for a fact that I stayed up a little bit later, at least a little. And how do I know that? Because my water bottle was still on my computer desk, right where I left it. I always take it to bed when I finally settle down for the night. I never forget that. So either he fixed the Xbox and doesn't remember, or something even weirder happened. Either way, I can't shake the feeling that something about that night didn't follow the usual rules. Can an object just refuse to stay found? To start, I'm a very detail-oriented person. I don't lose things, especially anything related to my wedding. What happened still puzzles me to this day. I bring it up sometimes because most people brush it off, assuming that we were just careless. But let me be clear. These were the only things lost or misplaced during the entire wedding process. When I brought my groomsmen to get fitted for their suits, we also bought 6 bow ties. I told them that I'd keep the bow ties and the boutonnieres with me until the wedding day so nothing got lost. I placed them in the kitchen, specifically on the island, with the rest of the smaller wedding-related items. 3 days before the wedding, which was out of state, we started packing everything. When I went to grab the bow ties, the bag they were supposed to be in was completely empty. We tore the house apart. We checked all the suitcases, the drawers, our cars, our trash cans, you name it. There was absolutely no trace of those bow ties. The only evidence they ever existed were the photos that we had taken when we bought them, and the fact that all of us remembered buying them. So, we came up with a solution. One of the groomsmen, my now brother-in-law, lived near the store where we got them. We asked him to go pick up replacements. Luckily, and maybe this is, a glitch in its own right, but he managed to find all of the same colors again. This time, to keep them safe, we told him just to leave them in his car overnight. That way, they'd be ready when we left for the venue the next day. Well, they disappeared too. He checked everywhere. He looked in his back seat, in his trunk, all over his apartment, also his trash cans, even the parking lot. Those bow ties did not exist anymore. Nothing else was missing. There was no signs of a break-in, no damage to the car. He was just stunned. He called us, apologizing, saying that he had no idea how they could have vanished, and he was sure that they were in the car the night before. At that point, we were officially baffled. So we went to a third store. We bought a third set of bow ties. This time, we had to change the colors, and I personally packed them in my suitcase. I zipped it up, kept it with me, and didn't open it again until we got to the venue. Those ones made it. Our parents were furious with us for losing the bow ties twice. We tried explaining what happened, but they didn't believe us. And honestly, I don't blame them. It sounds made up. But here's the thing. Everything related to the wedding was carefully accounted for. We tracked every detail. Nothing else was missing, not even once. Only the bow ties. The second loss especially, it happened within 12 hours of buying them. No logical explanation. They were just gone. To this day, it remains one of the strangest things that any of us in the wedding party have ever witnessed. I know this is super minor, but it happened last night, and I still can't make sense of it. My husband and I both have chronic health issues, so we take a fair number of medications. I'm the one who organizes our pills into the weekly pill boxes. Last night, I was doing just that, sitting on the couch with all of the bottles laid out around me. There was one prescription that I knew was running low, so I set that bottle next to me on the couch as a reminder to deal with it last. Normally, I empty the bottles first before organizing anything else, but this time I went ahead and filled the boxes for everything else first. As I finished with each med, I capped the bottle and dropped it back into the storage bag that I keep nearby. Finally, I reached for that one bottle, the one that I had set right beside me, and it was gone. I didn't get up. I didn't even shift positions. That bottle was in a small space, maybe 6 by 20 inches, right next to my leg. But when I reached for it, it just wasn't there. My husband and I searched everywhere. We pulled up the couch cushions, we checked all the cracks, even looked under the furniture, and nothing. It was like the bottle had vanished into thin air. One second, it was there, and the next, it wasn't. We ended up laughing in that tired, confused kind of way, saying that maybe someone in another dimension was now very disappointed to discover that they've got a low-dose antipsychotic instead of oxy. Thankfully, I was able to put in a refill request, but I still don't understand how something that small in such a contained space could just disappear. It's like reality hiccuped for a second. Why can I sense psychics, and why do they avoid me? My dad died in June of 1993. I was 18 at the time, just waking up after a late night out, partying with friends. As I was coming to, still somewhere between dreaming and full consciousness, I heard female voices whispering,
"Shh, he's waking up."
I remember it so vividly. I could hear my dad cracking jokes with my mom. He sounded like he was in a good mood. They were both laughing. It felt like a totally normal, peaceful morning. I hadn't even opened my eyes yet when I heard him say that he had to leave for work. Later that day, everything changed. I was called to the hospital. My dad had collapsed at work from a heart attack. He passed away in the ER. The voices that I heard that morning stuck with me. They didn't make sense, but they were clear, real, and unmistakable. Fast forward to June of 2016, my mom passed away. And once again, just as I was waking up, I heard those same female voices. The same tone, the same feeling, like someone or something was there with me during those moments. I've never been able to explain those experiences, but there's more. Over the years, I've noticed that I can sense people who are involved with the spiritual or metaphysical world. Tarot readers, psychics, empaths. I can feel it when they're near, even if they don't say a word. I'll ask them directly, "Do you have a gift?" And they're almost always caught off guard, but they eventually admit it and they say yes, they do. I've met a shaman, a Spanish curandera, several card readers, and psychics. I don't seek them out, yet they seem to just cross my path. But the strange part is, I don't even like those kinds of people. In fact, I tend to feel uncomfortable around them, but I still end up talking to them, as if to make them uncomfortable in return, just to see if they realize that I know. 2 card readers have refused to read my cards entirely. One told me that there's a dark entity hovering above me. Another said I'm pure, but that something dark is always trying to get to me. To be honest, I've never truly believed in any of this stuff. But now, as I get older, I'm beginning to wonder. I've also noticed this strange ability. If I say something like, "I hope that person gets what's coming to them," it actually happens. From accidents to, well, worse. I've never understood that. It's as if I'm cursing people without meaning to, and it scares me. Now, I'm 51, and I'm reflecting more on all of these experiences. The voices, the intuitions, the way certain people react around me. I don't know what it all means, but I'm starting to feel like I can't ignore it anymore. Has anyone else experienced anything like this? I'd really like to know that I'm not the only one. You probably know what your worst nightmare looks like, but what if you lived through it? Imagine this. You wake up surrounded by mourners, you're in a box, people are crying, and someone is reading your eulogy. And then it hits you. You're at your own funeral. That's not the start of a horror movie. That's the true story of Fagiliu Mukhametsyanov, a woman from Russia who woke up in her coffin. And if you're wondering how that's even possible, well, welcome back to the No Way Files. It was June 2011, in the city of Kazan, the capital of Tatarstan, Russia. Fagiliu Mukhametsyanov, 49 years old, was at home when she suddenly collapsed. She'd been complaining of chest pain, and then, just like that, she lost consciousness. Her husband, Fagili, rushed to call an ambulance. At the hospital, doctors examined her and declared her dead on arrival. The reported cause was a massive heart attack. Her body was released to the family, a coffin was prepared, and funeral arrangements were made. Her loved ones were devastated, but they did what grieving families do, and they tried to honor her memory. But what no one knew was that Fagiliu wasn't gone. Not yet. On the day of the funeral, mourners gathered around the open casket in a religious hall. It was a quiet moment of mourning, until it became something that no one there would ever forget. According to multiple reports, as people stood around the casket praying, Fagiliu suddenly stirred. Then her eyes opened, and then she screamed. Not a soft, confused gasp, but a full panicked scream. Imagine it. You think your loved one has passed away. You've already started the process of saying goodbye, and then suddenly, they sit up. Witnesses described sheer chaos. People screamed, and some even fainted. Others ran out of the hall in shock. It was like time had reversed, like death had been undone. But for Fagiliu, the horror was just beginning. Her husband, Fagili, later said, "Her eyes fluttered and we immediately rushed her back to the hospital." But what everybody wants to know is, what did she experience while she was in that coffin? Was she conscious the whole time? Could she hear the prayers and the weeping and the eulogies? We'll never know for sure, but what is clear is that the shock was too much for her body to handle. Just 12 minutes after arriving back at the hospital, Fagiliu Mukhametsyanov was pronounced dead again. And this time, for real. The official cause of death? Heart failure brought on by shock. In other words, she was literally scared to death. The obvious question is, how do you declare someone dead when they're not? Most modern hospitals follow strict protocols to confirm death. In many places, it's not just one doctor, it's multiple. They check for heartbeat, breathing, and brain activity. But in some cases, especially with limited equipment or outdated practices, errors happen. Conditions like catalepsy, coma, or even hypothermia can make a person appear dead. No breathing, no visible pulse, unresponsive. Combine that with a rushed diagnosis or a lack of advanced monitoring, and you've got a recipe for disaster. There have been dozens of documented cases around the world of people waking up after being declared dead, and some even survive the ordeal. But for Fagiliu, the stress of waking up inside her own coffin was just too much to recover from. After her final death, her husband was understandably furious. He told reporters from the Daily Mail, "I am very angry and I want answers. She wasn't dead when they said she was, and that means they could have saved her." And who could blame him? Not only had he nearly buried his wife alive, but she had to live her last moments in sheer terror, trapped inside a box, listening to people say goodbye. There were calls for investigations into the hospital's practices. Questions were raised about how medical professionals could have made such a fatal mistake. But, as is often the case, the story faded from headlines. No clear public disciplinary action was reported, and to this day, the case stands as one of the most haunting, real-life examples of premature death declarations. Fagiliu's story might sound like a one-off, but history says otherwise. In the 18th and 19th centuries, before modern medicine, premature burials were so common that people were buried with bells attached to their coffins, so if they woke up underground, they could ring for help. That's where the phrase, "saved by the bell," actually comes from. Some even say it inspired the phrase, "dead ringer." Fagiliu's case proves that even in the 21st century, we're not immune to the same terrifying mistakes. I mean, at the time of this recording, this happened less than 15 years ago. What would you do if you opened your eyes and realized that you were at your own funeral? What would you say? Who would you look for? And more importantly, would you make it out alive? Fagiliu Mukametsyanov did not, but her story leaves behind a terrifying reminder. Sometimes, we get a glimpse of death before it's really our time. And sometimes that glimpse is enough to push us over the edge. This is but one incident pulled from the No Way files. And trust me, there are more stories like this than you think. I don't know if I time-slipped or if everybody else did. I work at a summer camp in upstate New York. I'm a nurse, and during the summer months, I live and work on-site in the camp's infirmary, what we call the clinic. The building sits just across a little golf cart path from a structure that we call the milk station. Now, the milk station is basically just an open-sided shed, a roof held up by 4 7-foot-tall posts, one in each corner. That's it. There are no walls, no barriers, no privacy. If someone's sitting under the milk station, you can see them clearly from any angle, and vice versa. Right next to the clinic, there's a small gravel patch where we park our health center golf cart. It's only about 5 feet across the path from the milk station, maybe 20 feet total between the two. And let me tell you, that gravel is loud and crunchy. You always hear when someone's pulling in or parking there. One afternoon, near the end of the summer in 2019, I left the clinic with a coworker to run some supplies across to the other side of the camp. As we were heading out, we walked down the wooden steps of the infirmary and passed right by 2 staff members who were sitting and eating lunch at the milk station. We waved, exchanged a little small talk, did the usual camp chatter, and then we hopped into the golf cart and drove away. Maybe 10 minutes later, we returned. I pulled back into the gravel space, and as I got out of the car, My butt bumped the little bike bell that we had zip-tied to the side rail of the golf cart. It let out a loud, unmistakable bing. I laughed out loud, half embarrassed, and instinctively turned to make a self-deprecating joke about my graceful exit to the folks at the milk station. But when I looked over, no one was there. The milk station was completely empty. A little weird, considering that they'd just been there when we left, but I figured they just finished their lunch and had gone off to do something else. I didn't think much of it at the time. I headed into the clinic, I dropped off my things, and maybe 5 minutes later, I came back outside to head down to my cabin for a break. As I came down the clinic steps, I looked back towards the milk station, and suddenly, the same 2 staff members were back, sitting right where they'd been earlier. I blinked and thought, wait, what? They looked equally surprised to see me, and one of them said, "Hey, when did you get back?" I told them just a few minutes ago, but where did you go? You weren't there when I came back. And that's when things got really strange. They both swore, honestly and completely seriously, that they hadn't gone anywhere. They said they'd been sitting at the milk station the entire time and never saw or heard us return, which made no sense. We would have passed within 10 feet of them. The golf cart's engine isn't exactly quiet, and again, neither is that gravel. Not to mention the bell that I smacked with my butt when I got out. I was baffled. They looked equally confused. I wanted a sanity check, so I called my coworker, my golf cart buddy, out from the clinic, and I asked, without any explanation, "Hey, when we got back just now, did you see those 2 sitting at the milk station?" And she answered right away. She said, "Nope." I looked over to joke with them about taking a long lunch, but they weren't there. So all 4 of us just stood there, trying to make sense of it. There was no way that we could have missed each other, no way to walk by unnoticed, no trees or any bushes to hide behind, and no alternate path to or from the milk station. To this day, none of us can explain what happened. I've returned to work at the camp every summer since, and nothing like that has happened again. But that day, in 2019, remains without question the closest thing to a glitch in the Matrix I've ever experienced in my life. This wasn't the first glitch in this hospital. This happened back when I was still a nursing student, doing my clinical rotation in the labor and delivery ward at a local hospital. Our class was split into 2 teams, and I had the luck, or maybe the misfortune, of being placed on the night shift team. That night, as it turned out, was absolute chaos. The OB triage suite was swamped. Pregnant women were coming through those doors like it was a full moon or something. Every nurse, resident, and doctor on duty was being pulled in different directions. My instructor quickly saw how overwhelmed the staff were and sent me down to triage to observe and help out wherever I could. Around 2 a.m., a mom came in and went into precipitous labor. That is extremely fast delivery. In what felt like seconds, she had given birth right there in the triage suite. Naturally, the delivery room was left in a complete state of disarray. There were instruments everywhere, and all the signs of a fast and intense labor. Once mom and baby were stable, they were whisked away to a proper postpartum room so she could deliver the placenta and get cleaned up in a more controlled setting. And that's when my instructor turned to me and said, "Okay, go ahead and clean up the room so it's ready for the next patient." The glamorous life of a nursing student, right? I walked into the room. I took one look at the mess and thought, there's no way I'm doing this alone. Just then, one of my friends, who's also a nursing student on my shift, popped in to remind me that it was time for our lunch break. I asked if she could do me a favor and grab some fresh linens from the stockroom while I started clearing out the soiled stuff. And she agreed, and as she walked out, I turned my back to the mess, mentally preparing myself to dive into it. But when I turned around, I just froze from what I saw. The room was already clean, and not just tidied or moved around, it was completely pristine. Fresh sheets were already on the bed, the supplies were restocked, the trash bins were emptied. The room looked brand new, like no one had ever even stepped in it. I stood there, with my jaw on the floor, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And that's when my friend came back from the supply closet, holding the clean linens that I had asked for. She stopped dead in her tracks, looked around the room, and then looked at me and said, "Are you messing with me?" I shook my head slowly, eyes wide. We were both stunned. Without saying another word, she tossed the linens into the room, and we bolted to the nurse's station, pale as ghosts and out of breath. We told the charge nurse what just happened, half laughing, half panicking, and she just gave us this knowing smirk. Like this wasn't the first time that someone had witnessed something strange on that floor. And look, I know the night shift can mess with your head. Sleep deprivation is a very real thing, and hospitals are weird places, but this wasn't just me. I had a witness. To this day, it's still one of the strangest and most unexplainable things I've ever experienced. Needless to say, I'm probably not going into labor or delivery anytime soon. Sometimes, the Matrix just knows what you need. I was lying in bed, fully awake, while my partner got up to use the bathroom. Afterward, he walked into the living area to start making coffee. We were chatting casually the whole time. He kept the conversation going while he moved around the apartment, and eventually he brought over 2 cups and sat down on the bed next to me. On the dresser beside me was a glass of water that I had left from the night before. I picked it up and drank what was left. It was just a few sips, and noticed that I was still pretty thirsty. But I figured I'd just make do with the coffee for now, since I didn't feel like getting up again. We kept chatting for a while, enjoying the slow morning. And then, at some point, I glanced over and I noticed something strange. My water glass was full. I asked my partner if he had refilled it somehow without me noticing, and he looked confused and said no, he'd only made the coffee. And that's when it hit me. I had definitely emptied that glass just before he sat down, and neither of us had gotten up since. Another weird note, the water wasn't cold like he usually makes it when he brings me a refill. It was room temp, and the inside of the glass was covered in tiny air bubbles, as if it had been sitting there filled for a while. It didn't make sense. If my partner had filled it, it would have been ice cold, and he's the kind of person who always adds ice, or at least gives me freshly chilled water. So I chalked it up to a glitch. And honestly, I didn't question it too hard. I just took a sip, smiled, and happily drank my mysteriously refilled water. Did I shift into a universe with nicer stuff? This might sound like a mundane story, but it's been stuck in my head, and honestly, we joke that I must have shifted universes or something. It's weird, not dramatic, or intense as some others, just weird. In my kitchen, I have this pair of Farberware kitchen scissors. They came with our old knife block and were mainly used for opening plastic food packaging and not cutting bone like they claimed. They had thick black handles and chunky blades. In the middle, there was this little red plastic piece that you could twist to tighten or to loosen the blades. And between the handles, there were two small metal tabs. They didn't quite touch when the scissors were closed, and for some reason, I had this weird habit of squeezing my fingertip between them. I know that sounds dumb, but it never pinched, and I just did it. They weren't amazing scissors, but I did use them regularly, mostly for random kitchen tasks like opening frozen veggies, stuff like that. They were familiar. They were a fixture in our kitchen. One day, I needed to grab a bag of rice. I reached for the scissors in their usual spot, and I stopped. These were not my scissors. They were black, yes, but the handles were thinner, and there was no red plastic in the center, and no weird little gap between the handles. And stamped right on the blade was the word KitchenAid. I stood there, just holding them, kind of baffled. These weren't the ones that I've been using for so long. They felt completely foreign in my hand, too light, too smooth, and too new. I looked all over for my original Farberware pair. I opened up all the drawers, I checked the dishwasher. I even took a look in the trash can, thinking maybe they broke and one of us tossed them without thinking. But I found nothing. So I go to my husband and I ask, "Hey, where are the scissors?" He says, "In the drawer." And I say, "No, the real scissors, the thick ones, like with the red dot." He looked confused. He says, "Those are the scissors. We've always had those." Now I'm thinking I've lost it. I ask him what he remembers our kitchen scissors looking like, and he literally describes the old Farberware ones. Black, thick handles, red dot in the middle. I show him the KitchenAid scissors, and he goes silent for a moment. And then he says, "These must have come with our knife block." I check, and yeah, our current bamboo knife block is a KitchenAid branded knife block. But here's the thing, I'm the kind of person who likes all black everything in a kitchen. Black knives, black utensils, black towels. It's my whole vibe in there. This knife block is bamboo. I don't even remember agreeing to that. I always thought that it looked unfamiliar, but I just chalked it up to something that we bought when we moved into this house 5 years ago. My husband says the old Farberware pair must have been from our last apartment. We probably left them behind or lost them. But that doesn't explain why both of us distinctly remember using those scissors recently. Not 5 years ago, but very recently. I've cut packaging with them probably dozens of times. I even remember the feel of them, the weight, and the sound they made. And now, suddenly, we have this brand new pair of KitchenAid scissors that neither of us recognizes. It cuts better, it feels smoother, and somehow has replaced our old pair without anyone doing anything. We live alone, and nobody's even been to our house except for my cousin 6 months ago, and she didn't even go near the kitchen. So where did these scissors come from, and where did mine go? I still can't make sense of it. And sure, it's small, but something's off. I genuinely feel like I might have shifted timelines, and in this one, I have a nicer pair of scissors and a bamboo knife block that I don't remember choosing. What's going on with red SUVs lately? About 3 months ago, my girlfriend and I were driving home after a trip. She was behind the wheel and I was in the passenger seat. We were on the highway, and I remember this stretch of road had 4 toll booths spaced out along the route. As we approached the first toll booth, I noticed 2 SUVs parked just before the booths. One was dark blue, or maybe black, and the other was a wine red color. The red one caught my attention. The guy inside looked like your typical everyday dude. Beard, sunglasses, nothing unusual. I could see him pretty clearly since we were slowing down for the toll. At first, I didn't think much of it. Just another car on the side of the road, maybe waiting for someone or checking directions. But then, we passed the second toll booth, and I saw the same red SUV with what looked like the same guy in it. Parked just off of the side again, like he hadn't moved. It threw me off almost immediately. The highway had been pretty empty between the booths, no heavy traffic, no rush, and I was certain that no one had overtaken us. I turned to my girlfriend and I asked her if she remembered anyone passing us. She thought about it and said no, definitely not. We'd been cruising steadily and had a clear view of the road behind us most of the time. And now I'm thinking, okay, weird coincidence. But it doesn't stop there. As we got closer to the third toll booth, I couldn't believe it. There he was again. Red SUV, same dude with beard and sunglasses, parked in almost the exact same position just past the toll booth. Now, at this point, I'm on full alert. I keep replaying the road in my head, and there is no way that this guy got ahead of us 3 times without us noticing. There are no exits. There were no alternate lanes that would allow for a sneaky pass, and no memory of seeing that SUV fly by. I again told my girlfriend, and we both started to get that unsettling feeling, trying to rationalize it. Could there be multiple wine red SUVs with a guy that looks exactly the same in each of them? Yeah, it's possible, but it's kind of a stretch. We even started joking about it. Maybe he had a teleporting SUV, or he was some kind of highway ghost. But deep down, we both knew something about it just felt off. By the time we reached the 4th and the final toll booth, I was scanning the side of the road like crazy, practically leaning forward in my seat looking for another red SUV. But it was gone. There was none in sight. Not parked, not driving, not ahead or behind. Just gone. We spent the rest of the trip trying to piece it together, talking it through, but in the end, we chalked it up to just a weird coincidence, though neither of us could actually explain it in a way that made sense. It's almost like the simulation knew that I was onto it, and so it patched an update, preventing me from recognizing patterns. When I stumbled across this community, that highway moment was the first thing that came to mind. I know it might not sound wild compared to some of the other stories, but I'm still stuck wondering what we really saw. Was it deja vu? Was it a glitch? Or something else entirely? What did we see in the woods that night? Around 11:30 tonight, my boyfriend and I were leaving his house. We said goodbye to the dogs like we always do, and this part is important because it confirms all of his dogs were accounted for. Mac was inside. We said goodbye to Baby, Sandy, and Little Bit. We saw all of them. He lives on a private road where everyone knows everyone. His parents have lived there for 10 years, and no new people have moved in. And that's important because if there's ever a new animal around, it gets noticed quickly. People talk, and if a stray shows up, everyone hears about it. As we were pulling out of the driveway, we saw glowing eyes about 50 feet away. At first, my boyfriend thought it might be a rabbit or some other small animal. And all of the dogs were looking in that direction too, just curiously. So he turned the car to shine the headlights on whatever it was. But this thing didn't look normal. It was too big to be a cat, too small to be a deer, and also too small to be a pig. And whatever it was, it didn't run when the headlights hit it. Most animals would. At first, it went into the wooded area, but then it turned around and started inching towards us again, slowly. After every step it took, it would sit down again. It did that about 4 times before we drove off, and we were honestly so scared. The way that it moved wasn't natural. Its shoulders didn't look like they were in the right place. I thought it looked like it was walking on its back legs, but my boyfriend says that he saw it on all 4s. So maybe it switched? Its eyes were glowing yellow. Its coat was slick, black, and shiny. And the way it moved, it was almost contorted, like something wasn't right with its body. It almost looked like a dog, but it wasn't. I don't know. I still can't explain what we saw. And now, something I probably should have mentioned earlier, the only reason that we were even at his house was because he was spending the night at mine and he forgot his clothes. So earlier, when we left my house, I left the gate open. And here's the part that really messed with us. I live with my grandparents, who are disabled. Our driveway is about 150 yards long, if not longer. When we left, my grandparents would have already been asleep. I know they didn't shut the gate because I've done this before, and I always try to make sure the gate's closed before they wake up in the morning. But when we got back, my gate was shut. After what we'd seen, and with both of us already feeling shaken, that really freaked us out. We turned the car around, and now I'm writing this from the parking lot. If anyone has any idea what we might have seen, please let me know. We just want to know if this is something that we need to look out for, or if it can be explained somehow. One last thing. All the cats in the area are orange and white. The only dark-colored cat is Molly, and she's an indoor cat who never goes outside. And again, whatever we saw was way too big to be a cat. I get a weird, brain-tingling high from small social moments. Is that normal? There's this thing that happens to me that I've never been able to properly explain. It's subtle, kind of strange, but deeply real. Whenever someone recommends something to me, like a food or drink or even just a little random product, I feel this intense tingling in my brain. But it's not just like the pleasant sensation of being included. It's kind of like I'm high. And I mean really high. The tingling builds so much that it can actually mess with my vision. Everything feels a little floaty, like I'm slightly detached from my body, but in the most euphoric way. It's warm, electric, and almost sacred. And it doesn't have to even be a close friend recommending it. It could be a complete stranger. The second they say, "You should try this," and I actually do, it hits. I feel instantly connected, like I've just been invited into somebody's private little world, and for that moment, I'm included, seen, and welcomed. It also happens when someone helps me or shows me how to do something. Anything, really. As soon as someone steps into that guiding space, explaining, demonstrating, or teaching, it's like something inside me opens up, even if it's just how to fix a small thing or stir a drink a certain way. It feels intimate, like they're handing me a piece of their lived experience, and I get to hold it for a second. I remember asking my mom about it when I was little. I tried so hard to describe this weird, blissful feeling that I got when people shared something with me, and all she said was, "I don't know what that is." And honestly, no one that I've asked ever since has really understood it either. The feeling doesn't last forever, but I remember the moments so vividly. I can replay them in my mind later and feel it all over again. Like calling up a soft, beautiful memory and stepping into it for a few seconds. And every time it happens, I'm just in awe. For the longest time, I thought that maybe I was just too sensitive or wired differently, but now I'm starting to wonder if it's not something wrong, but something right. Like maybe I'm just someone who feels the magic in moments that others might overlook. So I guess I'm asking, does anyone else feel this way? There are some conversations in the comments about this phenomena, but mostly people agreeing to feeling the sensation when instead they get to help others, not so much when they're being helped themselves. Airport time glitch. This happened just yesterday at my nearest domestic airport, and honestly, I'm still confused about it. It was around 8 in the morning, and my mom and I were waiting for an early flight to another city. We'd arrived with plenty of time, so we were sitting in the small waiting area outside our gate. Everything was normal. Eventually, I really had to use the bathroom, so I got up and I wandered around for a minute until I found one nearby. And here's where things got weird. I walked into the restroom, feeling super desperate. My bladder was killing me. I went straight into a stall. I used the bathroom, which probably took 2 minutes at most, and then I went over to wash my hands. I didn't use the air dryer. I just shook my hands off like I usually do. And at this point, they were still visibly wet as I left. I headed back through the short hallway towards the gate area, but before I even got halfway through, I suddenly needed to pee again, like really badly. It hit me so fast and with the same intensity as before. It was as if I'd never even gone in the first place. Confused, and admittedly a little annoyed, I turned around and went back into the bathroom. I used it again, and this time when I came out, my hands were completely dry. I used paper towels, which I didn't touch during the first visit. And by the time I walked out, everything felt normal again. No urgency, no weirdness. But I couldn't stop thinking about how strange that was. Why did I need to go again immediately? And why did it feel like there was no gap between the two visits, even though I clearly remember washing my hands and leaving the first time? For some extra context, I'm young, healthy. I have no bladder issues or medical conditions. I wasn't tired or disoriented. And the strangest part is how physically real it all felt, and mentally. I felt like something was off. Almost like a skipped frame in a video or walking into a deja vu that you can't explain. I'm writing this while it's still fresh in my head because I don't want to forget or misremember any details. If anyone has a rational explanation, I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, I feel like I'm kind of going crazy. You ever have that feeling like the universe is trying to send you a message? Most of the time, we brush it off. A weird coincidence, a moment of deja vu, nothing to worry about. But what if the same disaster struck you twice? What if you survived something catastrophic, only to survive it again years later under nearly identical circumstances? And what if, when you looked into it, you realized the same man was behind both disasters? That's the story of Vit Klemisch, a man who outlived 2 dam collapses and the engineer who built them. And this is the No Way Files. Vit Klemisch was born in 1932 in Czechoslovakia, a small country in Central Europe that, at the time, was filled with rivers, valleys, and hydro-engineering projects. When Vit was still a child, likely around 6 or 7, his town was rocked by a catastrophic event, a dam collapse. We don't have all of the details of this first flood, but according to Klemisch's own writings, the disaster deeply affected him. Lives were lost, infrastructure was destroyed, and little Vit, he narrowly survived. Think about that. Your world quite literally washes away right in front of you. That kind of experience doesn't leave you. And for Vit, it shaped everything. He would later write that the memory of that flood haunted him. So much so that he dedicated his life to understanding water, its power, its patterns, and how humans try, and often fail, to control it. As he grew older, Klemisch didn't just become interested in hydrology. He became one of the best. He studied the science of water flow, flood prediction, and dam safety. Eventually, he moved to Canada and became internationally recognized for his expertise in hydraulic modeling and risk management. In the 1970s and 80s, he began working with various government and engineering bodies across Europe and North America, advising on flood control and infrastructure. This is a man who built a career on understanding how to prevent the kind of catastrophe that nearly killed him as a child. But fate, as it turns out, had one more test waiting. Years later, now as an established hydrologist, Klemisch found himself in another part of Europe, consulting on water management systems. He wasn't a child anymore. He wasn't helpless. But then, it happened again. Another dam failed, and Vit Klemisch somehow was nearby again. Another massive flood, another terrifying collapse of human-made infrastructure, and somehow, again, he survived. Now here's where the story shifts from just unlucky coincidence to full-blown cosmic punchline. Klemisch, ever the scientist, began looking into the history of the dam, how it was built, who designed it, and whether the collapse could have been avoided. And that's when he found it. The engineer who had designed this second failed dam was the same man who had designed the dam that collapsed when Klemisch was just a child. Two different regions, two different time periods, two separate disasters, but the same engineer. Klemisch had not only survived two dam failures, he had survived the same man's failure 2 times now. Let's pause here just for a second. What are the actual odds of this happening? Surviving one dam collapse is already statistically rare, but surviving 2? That's practically unheard of. Surviving 2 collapses, decades apart, both involving the same engineer, that's not just unlikely. It's the kind of thing that makes you question if the simulation glitched. And here's the bigger twist. It wasn't a dramatic conspiracy. It wasn't sabotage. It was just bad design. Twice. And somehow, the same survivor, now an expert in dam safety, was there to witness both. Klemisch never named the engineer publicly. In his reflections, he described the man as someone with a reputation for cutting corners and ignoring hydrological principles. One of the biggest criticisms that Klemisch had, both personally and professionally, was how water infrastructure was often treated as a static, one-size-fits-all solution. But nature isn't static. It's unpredictable. It's dynamic. And if you build a dam without understanding how water actually behaves, you're gambling with lives. And this engineer, he lost that gamble twice. After the second collapse, Klemisch didn't retreat. He didn't bury the story or leave it as an eerie footnote in his life. Instead, he used it. He doubled down on his efforts to teach the importance of hydrological knowledge. He gave lectures, he wrote academic papers, and he pushed for better standards in dam construction worldwide. He told his own story, not to gain sympathy, but to illustrate the terrifying consequences of ignoring science. And in the process, he became kind of a mythic figure among environmental engineers as the man who survived the same dam collapse twice. Vit Klemisch passed away in 2010, but his legacy lives on. Today, his research is still cited in hydrology courses. His insistence on respecting the unpredictability of nature changed how engineers approach flood risk modeling. But what people remember most, and the part that makes it into stories and lectures and, files like this one, is that his life looped around not once, but twice. That he lived through a nightmare, turned into a mission, and then found himself right back in the same nightmare only to survive again. So, what would you do when the same thing tries to kill you twice? Do you call it bad luck? Do you call it fate? maybe a lesson? Or do you do what Vit Clemish did and dedicate your life to making sure no one else has to survive what you did? Sometimes life throws you into chaos, and sometimes you crawl out of it, dust yourself off, and write the manual so nobody else has to. This has been the No Way Files. And I promise, next week's story is somehow even weirder. I saw someone who shouldn't exist sitting in my car. I just got home from work about an hour ago, and I feel like I need to get this off of my chest. Every single night, I've been having dreams about this Japanese girl. She's always riding shotgun in my dream car. It's a 1970 Plymouth Roadrunner, just in case anybody's curious. The dreams have been happening for a while now, but lately they've started to feel too real. She has a full name, first, middle, and last. Every dream is more or less the same. We're just cruising, laughing at dumb jokes, like the kind of laughs that feel effortless. It's peaceful, like we've known each other for years. Anyway, back to reality. Tonight, on my way home, I happened to glance over at the passenger side mirror, and there she was. Same hair, same clothes, same everything. It was her. I wasn't scared, and strangely enough, I had this sense of calm come over me until she turned her head and smiled. I instinctively smiled back, and just like that, she was gone. There was no slow fade out. She just vanished. The seatbelt was still undone. It was like she'd never even been there at all. I'm not sure exactly how to feel about it. Part of me thinks that maybe, in another universe, I actually got the girl of my dreams. Maybe dreams can bleed into reality, but I can't shake the feeling that there might be something deeper going on here. OP includes an update that adds, "First off, I'm really sorry for how long this update took. After the original post blew up, things went downhill for me fast. One thing after another, and honestly, I couldn't even bring myself to open Reddit. A lot of you said that she might have been a ghost, and frankly, I guess that could be true. I found out later that my car had been in a crash before I bought it, and the previous owner had died. I don't know anything about them. I just know they didn't make it. Some of you were concerned about my health. Thank you, really. I did go see a doctor, and physically, I'm doing fine. I also spoke with a therapist, and she believed the dream girl was some sort of representation of what I most deeply wanted in a partner. Not the looks, but the energy and the connection. The kind of soul-matching feeling, and I guess that made sense. I eventually realized the girl in my dreams looked a lot like Junko Yagami and Kaoru Akimoto, two Japanese artists from the 80s. So maybe my subconscious just stitched her together from bits of, nostalgic memory. I even saw a hand reader as well. Don't judge me. And she told me that I'd be meeting her soon. She also said something else, darker, but I don't think I'm comfortable posting that on here right now. Here's the extra wild part. The dreams started slowing down. A week later, I met my ex. She wasn't Japanese, but everything else about her matched. The way she talked, the way she made me feel, even the way she laughed. She was the real-life version of the dream girl. And get this, her name wasn't Reina, but one time we talked about future baby names and we both said Reina at the exact same time. I never told her about the dreams, and I don't know if I ever will. We broke up recently, and knowing her, she'd probably laugh it off, but it just doesn't feel like the right thing to share now. And one last thing, I did try to find the dream girl. I mentioned earlier that she had a first, middle, and last name. I had friends in Japan help me search for someone with her full name, but nobody came up. She doesn't exist. So, that's where I'm at. Honestly, I'm going through a rough time. I don't know when I'll be back online again. Hopefully not another 6 months, but we'll see. My dad and I heard strange knocks on the car's windshield while driving down the highway. I just found this subreddit, so I figured I'd finally share a story that stayed with me. This happened sometime in 2020, or maybe 2021. A few months before this incident, my uncle passed away. He'd been a heavy smoker for years and ended up catching a virus that his immune system just couldn't handle. It hit hard, and we lost him. It was a tough time for all of us. Fast forward to the day that this happened. My dad and I were driving to my grandma's house, which is a few hours away. We were cruising down the highway, going over 100 kilometers per hour, or 62 miles per hour, just chatting and listening to the road. Then, out of nowhere, we both heard it. We heard 3 distinct knocks right on the windshield. And when I say knocks, I don't mean like the sound a car makes or something from the road. These were very human-sounding knocks. Clear, rhythmic, and impossible to miss. My dad and I, we locked eyes instantly. We didn't even say anything at first. We just stared at each other like, what the hell was that? We tried to rationalize it. Maybe a rock or a bird. But at the speed we were going and the way it sounded, like it was right there in front of us, it didn't make any sense. A few seconds passed, then another knock. This time, it sent a chill down both of our spines. It was unmistakable. The same sound, same windshield. No one could have physically been there, obviously. But we both heard it. Again, we just looked at each other, completely baffled. We even talked about it for a solid 5 minutes afterward, trying to come up with any kind of explanation, but there wasn't one. And that's when my eyes started to tear up a bit. Not from fear, but from this strange, overwhelming feeling. We started wondering out loud if it was my uncle trying to reach out, the one that had just passed, just letting us know that he was around. It honestly didn't feel like a threatening moment. It was surreal and emotional more than anything else. Eventually, we made it to my grandma's house. Nothing strange happened while we were there, and the drive back was totally uneventful. But when we got home, things got even weirder. My dad went to his computer, and his wallpaper had been reset, like completely changed back to the default Windows background. It had never done that before, not once. And my dad knows his way around tech, so he checked the system logs to see if anything had triggered it. Something like an update or a user error. Anything. But nothing showed up. No explanation for that. To this day, I can't explain what happened on that highway or why the wallpaper changed that same day. But we both heard those knocks, and we both felt something strange and deeply personal about the experience. Oddly enough, we weren't scared. Just a little unsettled, curious, a little shaken, and maybe a little bit comforted. This person includes an edit that says, "After some time and giving this more thought, I think I'm certain that it was in 2021 because in 2020 I wouldn't have been able to visit my grandma. I never thought someone here would have experienced the same thing as me, and possibly at the exact same time." Why did I feel sick after seeing that car again? This happened earlier today, and I still feel shaken up about it. I was driving down a busy road, normal traffic, nothing out of the ordinary. As I was going along, a white car turned in from a side street on my right. I noticed it clearly because it merged smoothly into the left lane just ahead of me and then turned off again into another side street on the left. Nothing unusual at first, until a few minutes later. I kept driving along the same road when I saw the exact same white car come from another side street, again on my right, and then turn directly in front of me. At first, I thought that maybe it just looked similar, but then I caught a glimpse of the license plate, and I recognized it. It was identical. Same car, same plates, there was no question about it. As soon as my brain registered that, I suddenly began to feel lightheaded. A wave of nausea hit me, and even now, just thinking about it makes my stomach turn. It was the strange, physical reaction, as if my body knew something wasn't right before my brain could catch up. I haven't told anybody else yet, honestly. And how do you even begin to explain something like this without sounding crazy? I've had other unexplainable things happen in my life, but this one just felt different, more immediate, and somehow more real. So, I'm putting this out there just to see, has anyone else experienced something like this? A moment that feels like a small tear in reality. I don't have an explanation, but I can't stop thinking about it. This person includes an edit that adds, "I also believe that the sun used to be a paler and a softer yellow. Mornings between 8 a.m. and midday don't look like they used to. I often feel nostalgic for those mornings because I don't have them anymore." I take the same shortcut, but something strange keeps happening. So, there's this shortcut that I take whenever I go to my girlfriend's house. It's a small side street, just a quick detour to avoid sitting at a traffic light on the main road. The turn is easy to miss if you don't know it's there, but I've taken it enough times that it's basically part of my muscle memory now. As soon as I turn left onto this little side street, it curves immediately to the left and then it slopes downhill. It's a narrow road and the lanes are pretty tight, so it always requires a bit of extra attention. There's also this brief moment right as I enter the bend where the support pillar between the windshield and the driver's side window, that A-pillar situation, blocks my view of the oncoming traffic for just a split second. And almost every single time, the second my line of sight clears, there's a white car. It's going in the same direction, and it's always in the same spot. It seems to be coming uphill from the opposite side, close enough that I can instinctively grip the wheel a little tighter. It's not like we've ever collided or anything, but it's always just there, passing by me in the narrow lane like clockwork. At first, I chalked it up to coincidence, but then it started happening over and over again. on different days of the week too, even at different times of the day. Morning, afternoon, evening, it doesn't matter. I began to start to anticipate it. I'd turn the corner and I'd think to myself, all right, let's see if it happens again. And it always did. That same flash of white passing right by as I come around the curve. I finally mentioned it to my girlfriend one day. I just casually brought it up in conversation like, hey, have you ever noticed there's always a white car coming up that hill when I turn in? And she kind of shrugged it off like it was nothing, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Now, I look for it every time. And to be honest, I think that it happens more often now than I ever realized because I'm starting to pay attention. I don't know if it's the same car or just a white car, but it's always there. It's probably nothing, but it's weird enough that it sticks with me. Has anyone else ever experienced something like that? Where a random, repeated coincidence just starts to feel timed? Like you're seeing the loop every single time? I saw the coastline as individual panels. I live on the central coast of California, where Highway 1 cuts through parts of the county. It's one of those scenic drives that never gets old. My husband and I often take it just to clear our heads, cruising along the cliffs with the ocean stretching out beside us. On this particular day, we were heading south down Highway 1 with the coastline on my side of the car. My husband was driving, as he usually does, and the sun was out. It was one of those clear, crisp days where everything just looks extra vivid. We reached a stretch of the highway that runs parallel to the coast. It's a beautiful section where the road hugs the ocean, but is still separated from it by open grasslands. The sunlight was glinting off the water, and I remember thinking how familiar and peaceful it all felt. And then it hit me. That wave of deja vu. Not too unusual, I'll admit, but we've driven that road countless times. And this time, the feeling stuck around. It didn't fade, and instead of settling into a passing thought, it started to get deeper. I glanced away from the window toward my husband, and he was just singing along to the music, hands steady on the wheel, completely relaxed. The coastline, the grasslands, and the sky and the ocean was no longer a seamless view. It was split into panels, and not metaphorically either, I mean visually. It looked to me like reality was being built as we drove along, one panel at a time, each one slotting into place at the same pace as our car, as if someone or something was loading the scenery ahead of us in real time. It's like I was watching a video game render its environment, except this was the real world, or what I thought was the real world. My entire body froze. I didn't say anything. I didn't even reach for my phone. I just stared. I even looked back over at my husband again, by now half hoping that he'd noticed something was wrong. But he was still totally unaware, still driving, still singing, and truthfully, I didn't bother telling him right then. Every time I've brought up strange things like this in the past, he usually just laughs it off, says it's all in my head. But I know what I saw. We've driven that same route plenty of times since, and nothing weird has happened again. But every time we do, I can't help but stare at that same stretch of coastline, waiting for the illusion to break again. Because that day, in that moment, it changed something in me. It was a glimpse behind the curtain, like I caught reality in the middle of loading itself. And to be honest with you, I feel like I wasn't supposed to see that. Driving in a time loop. I've had 3 glitches in the Matrix, but this one freaks me out the most. It happened when I was in the car with my mom. She was driving, and my fiancé was in the car too. We had just finished shopping in a small rural village near our hometown. It's a place that we know well, and we always take the same route there and back. On the way home, we followed our usual path. We came up to the T-junction like we always do. The one with the road signs at the top clearly pointing left is the village, right is the hometown. The village itself only has 2 ways in and out. The road we arrived on, and the road that we were about to leave on. So, as usual, we turned right to go home, following the sign toward our hometown. We drove along the narrow country road, chatting casually, until we realized something wasn't right. Somehow, we found ourselves driving back toward the village, not just vaguely in that direction. We were literally passing the same shops that we had just left behind. Same signs, same little storefronts. It was like we had looped right back without even realizing it. At first, we thought we must have made some weird mistake, but the thing is, there are no wrong turns that you can make out there. It's a narrow country road with ditches and rivers on either side. No hidden side roads, no intersections to take a wrong turn at, just a straight shot. We all started pointing out the landmarks that we recognized, the ones that we had definitely already passed once. It wasn't just a feeling. We knew that we had already been there. We were completely freaked out, but we kept driving, trying to figure the whole thing out. Eventually, we arrived back at the same T-junction again, where those signs said left to the village and right to the hometown. Once more, we turned right towards home, and this time, we actually made it back. No glitches, no loops. We've talked about it so many times since then, and it still sends chills down my spine. We know that we did not make a mistake. There was no way to get turned around on that road. And to this day, my only theory, the one that weirdly makes the most sense, is that maybe, somehow, we had a fatal crash in some other version of our reality, and we just woke up in this one. Because, honestly, what other plausible explanation is there? I watched a car no-clip. I think the driver was an NPC. This happened a little less than a year ago. My sister and I had just finished helping our grandmother with some household chores. She's in poor health and can't do much on her own. She lives in a large, rural condo complex, 6 or 7 buildings, each with about 50 to 30 units, connected by multiple driveways and intersections. There is no assigned parking, so I parked as close to her unit as I could. As my sister and I were getting into my car, another vehicle pulled up and parked directly behind us, blocking us in. Her passenger door was just inches from my bumper. I don't remember the exact make and model, but it was a gray SUV, late 2000s or maybe early 2010s. A slightly overweight, middle-aged blonde woman stepped out of the driver's side and briefly apologized for boxing us in, saying that she was just unloading groceries and would only be a minute. She was clearly alone. It was broad daylight, and there were other people around, so I didn't think anything of it. We told her it was fine, we weren't in a rush anyway. I went ahead and started the car since she said she wouldn't be long. No problem. There were concrete stairs near the parking lot leading to the building that my grandma lived in, just feet from where we parked. I figured she'd go that way. But instead, after she opened her hatch and grabbed 2 grocery bags, she slowly walked across the entire parking lot to a completely different building on the opposite side. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mentioned to my sister that it seemed odd that she would park so far from where she was going. My sister said, hey, maybe she was just making a delivery and didn't know the layout well. It was a fair point, but the woman didn't look like she was searching for something. She walked in a straight line to that far-off building. Plus, you couldn't even see the building numbers from where she parked because of the distance. And there were plenty of open parking spaces much closer to where she ended up. That part stuck with me. Dang, dude, this lady sucks. Still, my sister, ever patient, shrugged it off, telling me not to overthink it. We watched the woman make several trips back and forth across the lot while we waited. It started getting annoying. We sat there for so long, I eventually turned my car off. When I finally saw her come back and get into her SUV, I started my car again. She pulled out, and I followed right behind her. She headed toward the exit, which is the same way that we needed to go. So maybe my sister was right. It seemed like she was just dropping off groceries or something. Except what happened next really shocked me. The SUV drove down the driveway, approaching the main road. Now, there are a lot of kids that live in that complex, so there are speed bumps and slow down, watch for our children signs everywhere. The woman came to a stop sign and turned right, disappearing behind one of the buildings for just a second. Literally, just out of my line of sight. I pulled up to the stop sign, I made the same right turn, and she was gone. Nowhere to be seen. There were no other roads that she could have taken, and this stretch of driveway just leads straight to the main road. It's lined with several speed bumps, and even if she floored it the moment she turned, I still should have seen her taillights. It was impossible for her to have disappeared like that, especially in an older minivan. I'm not a big believer in the paranormal, but after that, I started questioning everything. Why did she block us in? Was there a reason that we were stuck there for so long? My head was racing the entire drive home. I kept bringing it up to my sister, who agreed that it was weird, but didn't seem nearly as shaken. She's always been better at staying calm than me, but this, I don't know, man, this felt different. Did I see, or not see, something that I wasn't supposed to? It still haunts me. And maybe what bothers me the most is that every time I bring it up now, my sister just brushes it off every time, acting like it was nothing. Maybe she's in denial, or maybe she's trying to keep me calm. But deep down, I know what I saw. Was that really just a storm, or was it something else? My husband and I were driving from our home in Virginia to the nearest mall and shopping area in Maryland. It's about an hour and a half away. Where we live, we don't have much beyond a Walmart and maybe a few little souvenir shops aimed at tourists, so a trip to the mall was something that we were looking forward to. As we made our way down the highway, we had just crossed into Maryland, about halfway to our destination. After passing through the first town, we entered a long stretch of woods. And that's when something incredible happened. The sky turned this outrageous, beautiful shade of pink. It was so striking that my husband and I started talking about how unusual it looked. Then, out of nowhere, there was the loudest crack of lightning, and it started to pour. The rain was so heavy we could barely see the road ahead. Traffic slowed to a crawl, cars were pulling over, hazard lights were flashing. We were surrounded by buses, tractor trailers, and tons of cars that were all trying to navigate through the chaos. We drove like that for a solid 30 to 45 minutes, just crawling along the highway, trying to stay safe. As we continued, we passed through 2 small towns. We knew that we were going through towns because there were actual shops and businesses lining the roads. It's a big contrast from the endless woods that we had been seeing so far. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the rain stopped. The sky was that wild pink again. My husband and I looked at each other, completely confused, not just because the sky was back to that weird color, but because when we checked the clock, we realized that an hour and a half had passed. But somehow, we were back at the first town, the same one where the sky had turned pink the first time. It was like we never left. To this day, whenever we drive that highway, we always make sure to keep track of our time. We point out every town we pass, and we still talk about how bizarre that whole experience was. We still have no explanation for it, but we'll never forget it. Hey, were those cars driving backwards at 60 miles an hour? This happened about a week ago, but I can't seem to get it out of my head. It's just so puzzling. It was around 6:30 p.m., and I was sitting at my desk by the window, which looks out onto a busy carriageway. From my window, I can see a nearly kilometer stretch of road. Normally, the road is packed with cars going both ways until about 1 in the morning, when it finally starts to quiet down. It's rare to see it empty, especially during rush hour.
All right.
You get the point.
Yeah.
The road is busy.
So, what happened?
By 6:30 p.m., it was already pitch black outside. Every so often, I'd glance up from my laptop and see the steady stream of headlights in the distance. But then, the next time I looked up, the road was completely empty. That caught my attention right away, because during rush hour, there should have been heavy traffic, and all of it should have been heading north. But instead, I saw 3 sets of headlights, but they were coming south. At first, it didn't click, but after a few seconds, I realized the headlights were where the brake lights should be, at the back of the cars. And all 3 of these cars were the same. They were driving south, but they looked like they should have been facing north, as if they were moving backwards. I could make out the faint outlines of each cars under the moonlight, and I could just barely see the red glow of brake lights at the front, where the headlights normally would be. I watched closely, completely confused. They kept driving south, perfectly spaced apart, moving at about 60 miles an hour. The spacing between them never changed. I kept watching until they disappeared from my view, and the entire time they were on the road, no other cars appeared. The road was just abandoned. But the second they were gone, traffic suddenly returned to normal. Headlights all over the place again, as if nothing strange had happened at all. This is the first time anything like this has happened, and I haven't seen it since. It was just eerie. All 3 cars were driving the exact same speed, with the exact same distance between them. It looked too perfect. At first, I thought maybe one car was towing another, but they were too far apart for that, and even if it was a towing situation, the leading car would have been facing the correct direction still, right? And just to clear up any questions or confusions, I wasn't sleep deprived. I wasn't distracted. I know what I saw. When reality doesn't quite add up. I don't know if this would exactly be called a glitch in the Matrix, but I've had two strange experiences that I've never been able to explain. The first time, I had parked my car the night before in front of a friend's house. The next morning, my friend asked, "Hey, can you move your car up a little? The neighbor might have trouble getting out." I agreed, thinking it was no big deal. But as I walked outside, I immediately noticed that something was off. I remembered parking right up against the wall, carefully, neatly. And now, the car was sitting at least 2 meters, or 6 feet, away from it. I pointed that out to my friend, who just laughed and said I must not be remembering correctly. I insisted, so he agreed to check his external security camera. The footage showed the last movement recorded was the night before, which was footage of me parking tightly against the wall. After that, no motion detected. Not even cars driving past or anyone walking near it. Yet, somehow, by morning, it was visibly and mysteriously shifted away from the wall. The handbrake was engaged. The gear lever was still locked in place. There was simply no explanation. The second incident happened about a year ago. I was visiting the hospital and I parked my car in the free lot. I distinctly remember the spot because there was a small sign painted on a concrete wall in front of my car that caught my eye and made me smile. I don't know. It just reminded me of something nostalgic. After my appointment, I headed back to the parking lot, and my car wasn't where I left it. My first thought? Maybe I accidentally parked somewhere restricted and got the car towed. I looked around, and everybody else that I parked in the middle of was still there. They were all untouched. In front of the spot where I thought I had parked, there was just a simple guardrail. It wasn't blocking anything. There's no reason to tow. My second thought, somebody finally stole my car. But at a hospital? In broad daylight? I don't know, that seemed unlikely. Feeling frustrated and a little panicked, I kept walking around. And then, from a distance, I spotted my car. It was parked in a completely different spot, turned in the opposite direction from how I had left it. And worse, it was now sitting squarely in the middle of a bus lane. There's no way that I would have parked like that. Not only because it's illegal and blocks public transportation, but because I remember parking properly, facing that little wall with the sign on it. The car was locked, just like I had left it. There was no damage, no signs of anyone tampering with it. And to this day, I don't know, I still have no explanation for it. Why would anyone move a properly parked car out of a legitimate spot and just abandon it in a bus lane? Even if they had, how did they do it without causing any damage, or without anybody noticing, and without setting off any alarms? Both experiences leave me with more questions than answers. Imagine you're driving on Christmas Eve. Maybe you're heading out to see your family. Maybe you're just trying to beat the icy roads before they get worse. And then you slam headfirst into another car on a remote road. You get out to check on the damage, and then you realize you're very close to the person that you crashed with. Extremely close. The year was 1994, and in the small English town of Flitcham, Norfolk, Lorraine and Lavinia Christmas were both preparing for the holidays. They lived near each other, but that night, they had separate plans. No phone calls were made. There were no, "Hey, I'm on my way over" texts. Now, remember, this was the 90s. You just showed up. Lorraine decided that she wanted to visit her sister. Meanwhile, Lavinia had the exact same idea, at the exact same time. So, both women got into their cars, alone, and started driving toward each other on the same narrow, winding, icy road. Now, if you've ever driven in rural England during the winter, you know that those roads can be brutal. They're barely wide enough for two small cars. There's thick hedgerows and fields on either side. There's no streetlights. And when the ice settles in, it's like driving on glass. Visibility was low. The roads were slick, and neither sister had any idea that the other was on the road. At around 8:30 at night, just outside of Flitcham Village, their two cars rounded for a bend and collided head-on. Now, head-on collisions happen. Unfortunately, they're a grim reality of winter driving. But how often do you think it happens between two people who are related? And not just related, but identical twins. Oh, and by the way, their last name, if you missed it, is Christmas. Yeah, two women named Christmas crashed into each other on Christmas Eve. If you're wondering, no, this isn't a made-up story or an urban legend. It was reported in the Herald in Scotland, and it was documented in the book Weird and Wonderful Christmas by Joey Green. So what happened next? Well, miraculously, neither Lorraine nor Lavinia were seriously injured. They both suffered minor bruises and whiplash, but they were able to exit their cars and immediately recognize each other. Police were called to the scene, and when they realized the two drivers were twin sisters named Christmas, who crashed on Christmas Eve, even the officers couldn't help but laugh. The sisters were treated on site for minor injuries and were able to continue celebrating the holiday, albeit a little more carefully after the ordeal. When interviewed later, one of the police officers reportedly said, "It was the most ironic thing I've ever seen on duty." The Christmas sisters chalked the event up to fate and bad luck and icy roads. But you have to wonder, what are the odds? Two sisters, born together, sharing the same last name that perfectly matches the holiday, getting into the same mindset at the same moment, choosing the same route, and then crashing head-on on Christmas Eve. Coincidence? Or something weirder?